There is a peculiar irony in human nature. Those who seek enlightenment often end up losing the very fire that once drove them. They speak of peace, detachment, and transcendence, yet behind the veil of calmness lies a quiet decay of ambition. The sword that once gleamed with desire now rusts in the scabbard of apathy. You see, when man believes he has understood the illusion of the world, he begins to withdraw from the very struggle that gives meaning to his existence. This condition, what the modern world calls spiritual awakening, is nothing more than a psychological shift where one begins to perceive the futility of endless striving. It seems noble on the surface, yet it often conceals a dangerous delusion. When you strip life of its illusions, you also strip it of its flavor. The man who once fought for victory, glory, or love now stands before the same world unmoved, as if the theater of life has turned into a shadow play. His wisdom becomes a tranquil poison. Do not misunderstand me. Awakening has its virtue. To see through falsehoods is indeed strength, but the tragedy lies in what follows. Once a person has seen that most human pursuits are fleeting, he may conclude that all action is pointless. Thus, he kills his own drive in the name of enlightenment. He confuses detachment with indifference and peace with paralysis. The awakened mind begins to look upon the ambitious as fools and the passionate as slaves. But what he calls wisdom may simply be fatigue wearing the mask of insight. The essence of power, whether spiritual or worldly, lies in motion, in the will to influence, to shape, to command. Once that motion dies, the soul begins to rot in quiet self-admiration. Many awaken, but few return from awakening with the vigor to act. The rare individual learns to hold both truths at once, to see the illusion, yet play within it as a master. He treats the world as a stage and himself as both actor and director. That is true awakening, not the death of motivation, but its purification. Most who call themselves awakened are merely disillusioned. Their motivation did not die because they became wise, it died because they could not reconcile wisdom with desire. They saw the emptiness of pleasure and ambition, but lacked the strength to create meaning beyond them. Thus they drift, half awake, half dead. They smile gently, speak softly, and call it peace, but inside, a deep stagnation festers. They have not transcended life, they have merely stepped aside from it. When the fire of ambition burns, a man feels alive. His victories and failures alike give shape to his days. The pursuit itself, not the prize, defines his worth. Yet, when the veil of awakening falls, that fire flickers. He begins to perceive that everything he sought was dust. Wealth dissolves, recognition fades, love decays, and even wisdom corrodes in the passing of time. This vision, though sharp, can become venomous. For if one sees only the futility of striving, he condemns himself to a silent extinction. The awakened individual believes he has escaped the cage of desire. In truth, he has merely built a new one, a cage of apathy, polished with the illusion of peace. He repeats to himself that nothing matters, that all is transient, that striving is bondage. But these words, though dressed in serenity, conceal a coward's philosophy. The problem is not that the world lost its meaning, it is that he has lost the strength to assign it one. The true error of spiritual awakening lies in mistaking revelation for conclusion. To see the emptiness of the world is only the beginning. One must still decide what to do with that emptiness. Most stop there, seduced by stillness. They call their resignation enlightenment. But the awakened who ceases to act is no different from the ignorant who never began to think. Both are slaves, one to desire, the other to despair. In the ruins of disillusionment, power awaits rebirth. The man who understands the void and yet chooses to build upon it, he alone rises above both the dreamer and the cynic. But this requires an iron will, the ability to live without illusion yet not perish from it. Few possess this strength. The rest, having tasted the bitter fruit of awareness, retire from the garden entirely. Their spirit grows pale. They speak of love for all beings, yet cannot lift a finger to change the fate of one. They talk of divine flow, but in truth, they are carried away by the current because they have lost the will to swim. If you look closely, you will see this pattern in many who follow the so-called spiritual path. They meditate not to gain mastery over themselves, but to escape the pain of wanting. They call detachment liberation, but it is often only withdrawal. The warrior within them sleeps, while the philosopher within them mourns. And soon, even their mind grows weary of reflection. Life becomes a ritual of calm decay, a slow drowning in tranquility. A man is not meant to live without striving. Even the wisest must contend with the raw force of will. Without it, reason becomes sterile and enlightenment becomes illusion. To awaken is not to end the game, but to understand its rules and play with precision. The one who awakens and keeps moving becomes a master. The one who awakens and stands still becomes a ghost. The mind is cunning even in its silence. It seeks dominion. When awakening arrives, the mind does not dive. It merely changes its disguise. Before, it pushed man toward conquest. Now it whispers the virtue of stillness. It convinces him that withdrawal is wisdom, that disengagement is purity. The individual believes he has outgrown ambition, but in truth, his ego has simply transformed its weapon. Pride no longer speaks of power or success. It speaks of transcendence. And thus he falls to the subtlest form of vanity, spiritual superiority. Observe those who proclaim detachment from worldly things. They look upon the striving of others with quiet scorn, as if they have glimpsed a higher truth. They do not chase gold or titles, but they crave the recognition of being above such cravings. They renounce the game, yet secretly long to be admired by those still playing it. This is not enlightenment, it is disguised desire. The flame of ambition has not been extinguished, only inverted. It burns inwardly, feeding on self-importance disguised as humility. Here lies the paradox of awakening. One escapes illusion only to create another, more refined one. The seeker who once desired victory now desires virtue. He trades worldly ambition for spiritual pride. His mind remains addicted to distinction. Only the currency has changed. This shift appears noble, but remains rooted in the same hunger to matter, to be different, to be special. Thus, the awakened become prisoners of their own refinement, mistaking stagnation for serenity. If a man truly sees through illusion, he must also see through the illusion of detachment itself. Detachment is not a throne upon which one rests, a tool to act without being enslaved by action. To awaken and do nothing is to misunderstand the purpose of awakening. Awareness without will is impotence. The awakened man who refuses to engage the world betrays his own insight, for he knows that the game is illusion, yet refuses to shape it. He becomes not a master of life, but its silent witness. Noble in thought, useless in deed. Every philosophy that promises peace carries within it the seed of decay. Peace is not the absence of struggle. It is the mastery of it. Without motion, even the purest consciousness becomes stagnant water. The soul needs challenge as the body needs air. The great tragedy of awakening is not that people see too much, but that they act too little afterward. They stop fighting precisely when they finally understand what is worth fighting for. Those who survive awakening do not retreat into stillness. They return to the world sharper, colder, freer. They use detachment not to escape the battlefield, but to conquer it without being conquered by it. Their mind is serene, but their will remains fierce. For they know, to awaken is to see the dream clearly, not to stop dreaming. Once a man has seen the illusion of life, he faces a terrible choice, to wither in his insight or to wield it. Most choose the former. They wrap themselves in passivity, calling it peace. But a rare few, those born with the temperament of steel, choose the latter. They realize that understanding the illusion does not end the game, it merely reveals its mechanics. And to know the rules of illusion is to hold the reins of reality itself. To reignite one's will after awakening, one must first abandon the childish notion that meaning exists to be found. Meaning is not discovered, it is manufactured. It is the creation of a mind that refuses to drown in its own knowledge. The man who has awakened and lost motivation has simply failed to create new meaning after destroying the old. He tore down his temple and never built another. Thus, his spirit wanders among ruins, mistaking emptiness for truth. But power begins precisely there, in the ruins. The destruction of illusion is not a tragedy, but a liberation. Once you have seen through false purposes, you stand free to construct your own with precision. The awakened who understands this becomes dangerous. His motivation no longer depends on illusion, it is self-generated. He acts not because he believes his actions are eternal, but because he wills them to exist, even knowing they will fade. His will becomes an art, his ambition, a conscious performance. This is the highest form of mastery, to pursue with full awareness of the futility, yet to pursue nonetheless. There is a quiet dignity in creating purpose where none exists. It separates the philosopher from the fatalist. The fatalist sees the emptiness of the world and surrenders. The philosopher sees the same emptiness and declares, "Then I shall fill it." This is the rebirth that few achieve after awakening, the restoration of fire under the shadow of truth. The one who attains it becomes immune to despair, for he no longer depends on illusion to sustain him. His motivation is not a reaction to need, but an expression of power. To awaken and remain strong, one must make a pact with contradiction. You must act as if your actions matter, knowing they do not. You must pursue mastery while knowing that mastery itself is a fleeting mask. You must play the game fully, with awareness that it is only a game. The ignorant act without understanding, the weak understand and refuse to act, the wise act while understanding. That is the difference between awakening that kills and awakening that crowns. The world does not favor those who retreat. Even the enlightened must contend with necessity, hunger, time, and mortality. Thus, awakening is not an escape from struggle, but an invitation to engage with it intelligently. The awakened who end their journey in stillness are like soldiers who lay down their arms before the battle begins. But the awakened who return to motion, who fight with clear eyes and a detached heart, they become something rarer, lucid warriors in a sleeping world. In the end, the tragedy of spiritual awakening lies not in seeing too much, but in stopping too soon. Most who awaken believe they have reached the summit of consciousness, yet they merely stand at the first clearing beyond illusion. What they call enlightenment is often exhaustion. They have stared too long into the emptiness and mistaken it for the destination. They do not yet understand that beyond emptiness lies creation, and beyond peace, power. The awakened man who loses motivation reveals that his awakening was incomplete. True awakening does not dissolve the will, it refines it. It purges it of vanity, of blind desire, of servitude to outcomes. It leaves behind a cleaner, colder form of drive, one that acts not out of hunger, but out of choice. This is the will of the sovereign mind. When one reaches this state, ambition is no longer poison, and peace is no longer prison. They become tools, balanced and deliberate, but few endure the inner storm required to reach this stage. They mistake the collapse of illusion for death itself. They see that nothing lasts, and so they conclude that nothing matters. Yet the truth is sharper precisely because nothing lasts, everything gains meaning only through the force you give it. When you know all fades, every act becomes sacred, every motion deliberate, every word an assertion of your will against the silence. This is not the peace of detachment, but the power of creation. The one who truly awakens must learn to stand between two abysses, desire and despair, without falling into either. He must see that life is a performance of consciousness, and he both actor and author. To stop acting is to betray the role. The enlightened fool believes he must escape the play. The enlightened master continues it knowingly, writing his own lines. His motivation is no longer born of ignorance, but of command. He no longer strives to possess, he strives to express. He does not seek approval from gods or men. His standard is himself. When the fire of purpose burns through illusion, it becomes clear, cold, and enduring. Such motivation cannot be killed, for it does not depend on reward. It flows from the simple truth that existence itself demands assertion. To be awake is not to retreat into stillness, but to stand lucidly within chaos and move with intention. The world will call this madness, the wise will call it mastery. So if your awakening has killed your motivation, know this: it has not killed it. It has stripped it bare. It has taken from you the childish reasons to act, so that you may find a reason born from strength. The emptiness you feel is not punishment, it is potential. It is the space where a new kind of will can be born, one immune to illusion, one rooted in clarity. Only then does awakening fulfill its purpose, not as an end, but as the beginning of dominion over the self. The man who awakens and stops becomes a ghost. The man who awakens and creates becomes a god.